Okay, here we go. This should be a little bit better. Just easier to edit everything and just do a hardcore TLDR. Hardcore TLDR, okay. So based on what we just saw in the announcements, dude, how am I messing up this much? Based on everything we just saw in the announcements, let's try to cover this on a step-by-step basis. So we have trading and auction house is allowed. This is all based on the first announcement of the hardcore service, by the way, so the TLDR. The TLDR of the PTR, I guess, or the first version of the PTR. Everything here could be changing though, based on feedback. So first of all, trading and auction house is allowed. Grouping is allowed as well. Grouping is allowed. There'll be minimal, like, actual restrictions, right? They want people to be able to play the game the way they want, with some restrictions that we're going to be talking about. So we have these two, for example, for the hardcore servers. Death equals a ghost. That's also one, for example. We have the duel to the death. Duel to the death is also coming out. They have been working on fixing a lot of the griefing methods. PvP flagging has been worked on and has been fixed. They've been fixing like individual quests, for example. They have gone in and quests that would flag you no longer flag you, and so on. For the griefing as well, like mob leash will be zone only. So if you, for example, pull Teramus and you try to bring him out of Blasted Lands, he will just reset. So for the mob leashing, it's mostly zone only. They're trying to fix everything here. And what else do we have to talk about? We also have the dungeons. This one, I think I'm going to leave dungeons for last, because for the dungeons, there's a lot of the things that we do need to talk about. So mob leash zone only. Right here, Petri flasks are in. That's kind of a controversial one. Petri flasks, they are pretty much being unchanged, right? They just stay in the way they are. So people can do them if they want to. It's going to be like a luxury item. You have to get a Black Lotus. So Black Lotus farming is back, boys. If you want to make massive amounts of gold on this server, just farm Black Lotus, right? That's going to be insane. So gold farming is definitely back based on that. You can just buy a Petri flask and you will basically save your life. The thing is, even with Petri flasks, people are still going to die all the time. But at least it gives you a way out if you can predict your death. You have to use it while you're still alive. It's not like you bring you back from death mechanic. But personally, I would like to see Petri flasks either being removed or nerfed to some degree. But as of right now, they're staying the way they are. Right, so it is what it is. So let's talk about dungeons. Dungeons. You can only do one dungeon reset per day. If I try to go back to the Twitter post, yeah, I can just pull this up real quick. Web browser. Here we go. Classic WoW Hardcore. Death on Hardcore Realms is permanent. PvP battles are opt-in, so you have to physically opt in for PvP battles. PvP Battlegrounds and Battle Masters are disabled. So I know some people wanted to do Battlegrounds on Hardcore, where it wouldn't kill you, for example, just like have a pause on that mechanic or something to do Battlegrounds, but they're going to be disabled. Most creatures will leash when leaving the area or the zone. Below level 60, all dungeons will have at least a 24-hour timer, so they didn't confirm this, but they said at least 24-hour timers. A new feature, gameplay, all of this stuff, so they will ban people basically trying to grief. But below level 60, all dungeons will have at least a 24-hour timer. So if you played Wrath or TBC, think of dungeons like their heroic lockout. If you do stockades, storm and stockades, you will then have a 24-hour lockout timer where you can't do stockades again. You can't zone in, right? So think about it that way. You can do every single dungeon once per day, just like a heroic dungeon, but once you get to level 60, that restriction will get lifted. In that case, you can do every dungeon as many times as you want, which is going to allow, if you're a feral druid, for example, you need to farm Nomer again over and over, which I think is good that they are lifting that at level 60. And there's one thing as well that they did talk about, but isn't actually shown in this post, and that is the fact that if you are under level 60, you can't group with someone who are level 60. So let's just put all the dungeons in. Below 60 equals 1 per day in dungeons. Let me just try to space here so it shows quickly. Dungeons. Below 60 equals 1 per day per dungeon. Over 60 equals farm. Now, if you're level 60 or below 60, and group with 60. So if you are a level 60 character and I'm level 10, we can't do a dungeon together. This will effectively make it so that people can't boost each other inside dungeons, which I personally think is a good thing, because a lot of people would have tried to buy boosts. That way they can just skip the most dangerous levels and just get boosted instead. Now you can't. There's no boosting that's going to be involved. Sure. Some people could say you could make a level 59 twink and then boost a level 59, boost a level 10, but then you can refer back to the fact that you only have one per day per dungeon, so even that's going to be difficult. And they also talked about the fact that they're putting in Season of Mastery changes. And for those of you who did not play Season of Mastery, that's basically like if there's a 10 level disparity, or more than 10 levels, or like a big disparity between the lowest level of the group and the highest level of the group, you basically get no experience. So boosting is effectively gone. There's not going to be any types of boosting. If there's like a 10 level disparity, then you will get pretty much no experience from mobs. Sure, in some cases you could get a level 59 to run you through Dead Mines once just for the quests, but why would you? I don't know. Boosting is not going to be that big of a thing. It's not going to be happening much. There might be some ways to work around the system, but they have definitely done what they can to make it so that people don't farm dungeons. Now, what I like about this, the one dungeon per day, one dungeon per day per dungeon, or one reset per day per dungeon, is the fact that people will no longer be farming Scarlet Monastery like those dungeon cleaves, mage cleaves, AoE cleaves that we saw in Classic WoW. This will make it so that people are leveling in the open world, which is exactly what hardcore is meant to do. Now the thing is, if you only have, in the current version of Classic era, we only have one reset per dungeon forever. In which case, you can't do every single dungeon quest. If you're doing Sulfurik, for example, not everyone will get their troll tempers, you will have to roll for it, and 2 or 3, maybe 4 if you're lucky, out of 5 get their quest complete. That's it. And the trolls, they take hours to respawn. So as of right now, that's not the only dungeon, by the way. There's several dungeons like that where you have to wait for respawns if you want to complete it, or even Uldaman can be really tricky to do in one reset. It is doable, but it is tricky. Now having the ability to run dungeons more than once throughout your leveling process, just like one per day, allows you to do all the dungeon quests if you want to. It's just like a quality of life upgrade, plus people that do want to do dungeons, they still have the actual opportunity to, you just can't farm them 24/7, which I personally really do like. This is a big W. Now so far the hardcore servers I personally think is looking really good. Now let's talk about 2 more things. So PTR, for example, PTR tomorrow and level cap is 30. There we go. I feel like that's pretty much all they talked about, right, for the hardcore servers. That's a TLDR of the hardcore servers right there. Trading and auction house is allowed, grouping is allowed, death equals ghost, duel to the death, griefing and PvP flagging is being fixed, mob leashing is the zone only, petri flasks are unchanged for now, hopefully they change their minds on that one. PTR tomorrow, level cap on PTR is 30, and for dungeons you can only do 1 reset per day per dungeon, below level 60, over 60 that restriction gets lifted and you can farm, below level 60, you can't group at the level 60. What do we feel about this, boys? I'm feeling pretty good. I'm kind of happy with all of these announcements. The only thing I'm not happy with is the Petri Flasks, and I mean, if we take a look at all of these things, there's so many things to be happy about, and one thing to be unhappy about. The one thing I guess I can mention is like solo self-found, so they touched on this subject. They are not putting in any rules, like people can just keep using the add-on if they want to, but they also verbally said they are subjective to feedback. They are listening to the community, and they actually talked about adding an NPC with a buff for solo self-found. Now, it would be great if they just add a NPC like Soul of Iron with a buff for solo self-found, and even give them a title. I feel like if you're doing solo self-found, you should get something for it, like a reward, like a visual thing, either a buff that shows the people that you've done solo self-found, or a title. I feel like a title is good, doesn't really take away anything from the game itself, and just adds a little bit of value, and gives an incentive to do solo self-found. That's the hardcore TLDR though. Big W's today, and that announcement was pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. PTR tomorrow, definitely looking forward to the PTR. We're going to be trying our best to break the PTR and report everything we can.